Part 7. For 3 mornings Coco waited. Each dawn he climbed onto the highest stone of the broken wall overlooking the lane. Each dawn he watched the road. Each dawn he expected to see Brendan's familiar stride, Patrick balancing a bundle over one shoulder, Kathleen smiling wearily, and little Eileen running the last few yards with her arms open wide. Every dawn the road remained empty. By the 3rd morning, even a cat could no longer pretend. The Caseys were not coming home. The cottage had become a strange place. Without voices, it echoed. Without smoke, it smelt of damp earth and broken timber. Without Eileen, it had forgotten how to be home. Coco wandered from room to room, or what had once been a room. He jumped onto the fallen hearthstone where the fire had always burned. Cold. He rubbed against the leg of the broken table. No one laughed. He climbed against the windowsill where Eileen had often lifted him to watch the rain. The window was gone. Only the wind remained. He sat there until sunset. Nothing changed. On the 4th morning, hunger made the decision for him. He caught a mouse beneath the ash tree. He ate slowly, then looked once more toward the empty lane. If the Caseys were not here, perhaps they were somewhere else. That seemed obvious enough. Humans often went somewhere else. The difference was that they usually came back. This time they hadn't, which meant he would have to find them. Cats seldom searched for anyone. Usually it was people who searched for cats. But Eileen had once spent half a rainy afternoon looking for him after he had fallen asleep inside Brendan's hay cart. She'd called his name until she cried. He remembered how happy she had been when he'd finally poked his sleepy head from beneath the hay. Now it was his turn. He began with what he knew, the lane, the little stream where Patrick sometimes fished, the old crossroads where Brendan greeted neighbours on market days. Every few 100 yards, Coco stopped. He sniffed. Humans left scent behind. Boot leather, wood smoke, soap, wool, rain. The Caseys had their own smell. Brendan smelled of fresh earth, peat smoke and horses. Kathleen smelled of bread, though less so lately, and lavender she sometimes gathered in summer. Patrick smelt of cut grass and wood shavings. Eileen smelt of wildflowers, even in winter. Somehow she always smelt of wildflowers. He searched for that scent. The wind gave him nothing. The countryside had changed. He noticed it now because he was seeing places he had rarely visited before. Many cottages stood empty. Doors hung from broken hinges. Thatched roofs lay collapsed upon the ground. Some had already begun disappearing beneath weeds. Others looked as though their families had simply walked away yesterday. He climbed into one through a shattered window. A cracked teacup still rested on a shelf. A tiny knitted sock lay beside the cold fireplace. Someone had left in a hurry. Someone who had expected to return. They never had. Coco backed quietly outside. It felt wrong to linger. Empty homes deserved silence. Near midday, he reached another little farm. Smoke still rose from its chimney. A woman stood outside washing clothes in icy water. 2 children watched her without speaking. Neither looked much older than Eileen. They noticed Coco immediately. The younger child smiled faintly. A kitty. She took one small step towards him. The older boy gently caught her sleeve. No. But, leave him. Why? He looked towards their mother before answering. 'Cause he belongs to himself. The little girl nodded, though she clearly didn't understand. Neither did Coco. He slipped quietly away before they could come closer. As afternoon wore on, the roads became busier, not with carts, not with farmers, with families, walking, always walking. Some pushed little hand carts piled with blankets. Others carried babies wrapped in worn shawls. Old men leaned upon sticks. Women struggled beneath bundles almost too heavy to lift. Children trudged behind, heads bowed, too tired even to complain. No one spoke very much, only boots upon mud, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Coco watched from beneath hedgerows. Where were they all going? Why had everyone suddenly left their homes? That evening he came upon something that made him stop completely. A family lived beneath a hedge, not beside it, beneath it. Branches had been bent downwards to make a rough shelter against the wind. Inside lay a man, a woman, and 3 children. The youngest coughed constantly. The oldest stared blankly into the distance. The mother noticed Coco. For one brief moment her tired face softened. "Look," she whispered, "a wee black cat." The youngest child managed the faintest smile. The Father turned his head slowly. He watched Coco without moving, not threatening, simply watching. After a while, Coco continued on. He kept a respectful distance. Something about the family felt terribly fragile, like birds with broken wings. The next day brought more people. Some sat beside the road because they were too weak to continue. Others lay beneath blankets that barely moved. A priest knelt beside one elderly woman, praying quietly. No one else stopped. There were simply too many. The roads themselves seemed to have become rivers carrying sorrow across County Mayo. Coco had never imagined so many humans existed, nor that so many could look exactly the same. Thin, silent, hungry. He crossed a narrow stone bridge late that afternoon. Below, the stream still rushed cheerfully over smooth rocks. Trout still leapt. Kingfishers still flashed blue above the water. Nature seemed not to understand, or perhaps it understood too well. The river continued flowing because rivers always flowed. The birds hunted because birds always hunted. The foxes still prowled. The crows still argued. Life went on. Only humans had forgotten how. Coco climbed onto a moss-covered wall overlooking a winding road. He sat there for nearly an hour. Watching, waiting. Every little girl with red hair made his heart leap. Every time it wasn't Eileen. He began to wonder whether he had already walked past them. Perhaps they had taken another road. Perhaps they had crossed a field while he hunted mice. Perhaps they were searching for him just as he searched for them. The thought made him stand. He could not stay in one place, not now. The stars were already appearing when he found a familiar scent. Faint, very faint, almost gone. He lowered his nose to the muddy road. Wildflowers, peat smoke, soap, Eileen. His heart raced. He followed it eagerly, 20 yards, 30, 50. Then, nothing. Rain. Precious night's shower had washed the scent away. He searched desperately in widening circles, across the road, into the ditch, along the hedge. Gone. Completely gone. He sat in the darkness for a long time, staring at the place where the trail had vanished. It was the closest he had come. So close, yet still impossibly far away. Above him an owl called into the night. Coco answered with a quiet, lonely meow. Not because he expected Eileen to hear, but because somewhere deep inside he wanted her to know he was still looking. And somewhere, though neither of them could know it, a little girl lying beneath another hedgerow whispered one name into the darkness before sleep finally claimed her. Coco. Part 8. Morning arrived wrapped in cold rain. Not the fierce storm that swept in from the Atlantic, but a quiet, relentless drizzle that seemed determined to soak everything it touched. Coco shook the water from his coat beneath the shelter of a stone bridge. He disliked rain. Cats often did. Rain muffled sounds, blurred scents, and turned every hunt into hard work. Still, he had no choice. Somewhere ahead, Eileen was waiting. She simply didn't know it yet. The roads had become muddier than ever. Bootprints overlapped until they formed long ribbons pressed into the earth. Thousands of footsteps, perhaps tens of thousands. Every one of them told the same story. Away, always away, never home. Coco padded along the grassy verge where the footing was drier. The people scarcely noticed him now. Most kept their eyes fixed on the road immediately before them. Looking farther ahead required hope. Many seemed to have very little left. Near midday he passed a small chapel. The doors stood open. Families crowded inside, though not for mass. There simply wasn't room anywhere else. Blankets covered the stone floor. Children slept, curled against their mothers. An old man coughed into a rag that had once been white. Father O'Malley knelt beside a young woman, speaking softly enough that only she could hear. His shoulders looked even more bent than before. Outside, Coco watched from beneath a yew tree. The priest noticed him. For a fleeting moment their eyes met. Father O'Malley smiled sadly. "Ah," he whispered, "so you've survived too." The words meant nothing to Coco. The gentleness behind them meant everything. The priest reached into his pocket. He searched. Then searched again. Finally, he withdrew his empty hands and looked at it with quiet disappointment. "I'm sorry, little fellow." Coco blinked. There was nothing to forgive. The priest had always smelt of kindness. He still did. Farther along the road, the countryside changed. Fields that had once held potatoes were empty. Instead, fences had been mended, stone walls repaired, new gates erected. Beyond them grazed cattle. great glossy animals with thick coats and broad backs. They lowered their heads peacefully onto rich green grass. Coco watched them curiously. They looked remarkably well fed. One old cow lifted her head. "You don't belong here." Neither did she, not really. The smell of fresh timber lingered around the new fences. This had belonged to someone else once. Even Coco could tell. He slipped quietly onward. By afternoon the rain had stopped. Thin shafts of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating patches of countryside while leaving others in shadow. It made the world look divided. Hope over here, despair over there. A trick of the light, nothing more. Near a crossroads he found another family living beneath a hedge. This time there were no children playing, only silence. A grandmother gently rocked back and forth, humming to herself. A young mother held a baby wrapped so tightly in blankets that Coco couldn't see its face. The baby's cries had ceased. The mother still whispered lullabies. The songs continued whether the child answered or not. Coco kept his distance. Some grief was too large even for comfort. He hunted that evening in a neglected field. The grass had grown long where no one had harvested it. Mice darted through the tangled stems. He caught one quickly, then another. He buried the second beneath a flat stone. Old habits. If he found Eileen tomorrow, she might be hungry. He wanted something ready. Cats did not understand saving for the future. But Coco had begun doing it anyway, without realizing why. The sun was setting when he climbed a low hill. From its crest, he could see miles across western Mayo. Smoke rose from scattered villages. Roads wound through the valleys like ribbons. Tiny figures walked them, always walking. He wondered if one of them might be Eileen. She would look so small from here. Too small to find. He sat until the last light faded, then climbed down. Darkness brought unfamiliar sounds, not foxes, not owls, people. Coughing, praying, crying softly in their sleep. The roads themselves seemed alive. Coco found shelter beneath a fallen hawthorn. From there he watched little fires flicker beneath hedgerows, each one surrounded by families with nowhere to go. The families reminded him of home, of Kathleen stirring supper, of Brendan warming his hands after work, of Patrick carving little whistles from elderwood, of Eileen laughing because Coco always tried to catch the sparks rising up the chimney. He closed his eyes. Home had become a place that existed only in memory. The following afternoon brought the first real fright of his journey. He had just crossed into another lane when he smelt rabbit. Fresh, very close. He slipped silently into the long grass. Ahead, a young rabbit nibbled clover beside the ditch. Coco lowered himself until his belly almost touched the earth. Every muscle grew still. His tail stopped moving. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. He sprang. The rabbit bolted. They raced across the field. Coco gained with every leap. Another bound, and then he froze. Voices. Human voices. The rabbit disappeared through a gap beneath a hedge. Coco scarcely noticed. He crouched low. 2 men stood beside the road. They were painfully thin. Their clothes hung from them like blankets over fence posts. One leaned heavily upon a stick. The other stared towards the field where Coco hid. "I saw it." "A rabbit?" "No, a cat." The second man slowly turned. His eyes searched the grass. "Black one?" "Aye." Silence. Then the older man spoke words Coco did not understand. "Wouldn't feed us long." "No, but it would feed us." Neither moved immediately. They simply watched. Coco remained perfectly still. The wind shifted. One of the men pointed. "There!" Their eyes met his. For just an instant, the older man's face changed. Not anger, not cruelty. Hunger. A hunger so deep it had swallowed everything else. He stepped into the field, slowly, carefully, speaking softly. "Here now." Coco did not move. The voice sounded almost friendly. Another step. "Come on, little fellow." One more. Then the younger man circled wide to cut off his escape. Something deep inside Coco suddenly understood. This was not how people behaved. Not people. Not humans. Not the creatures who scratched behind ears and laughed at crooked grass crowns. His fur bristled. The older man lunged. Too late. Coco exploded from the grass like an arrow loosed from a bow. He darted between the younger man's legs, felt desperate fingers brush the tip of his tail, then bounded over a stone wall in a single effortless leap. Behind him came only exhausted voices. "Missed him. God forgive us." He did not stop running, not at the next field, not at the next hedge, not until the sounds of the men had vanished completely. Only then did he collapse beneath a horse bush, his sides heaving. He licked the place where the man's fingers had touched his tail, as though washing away the memory. His heart pounded, not because they had chased him. Foxes chased him. Dogs chased him. That was ordinary. No, it was because they had been human. He thought of Brendan, of Kathleen, of Eileen, of the priest, of every gentle hand that had ever stroked his fur. Then he thought of the two starving men. Slowly a terrible idea crept into his mind. Perhaps the world had changed. Perhaps humans no longer loved animals. Perhaps hunger had broken something invisible between them. He looked up at the darkening sky. The swallows had already flown south. Soon winter would come. As the evening wind whispered through the hedgerows of County Mayo, the little black cat curled into the smallest ball he could manage. For the first time since Eileen had named him 6 years ago, Coco was afraid to sleep near the road. Not because of foxes, not because of dogs, but because he no longer knew whether he could trust the creatures he had always trusted most.